A man sat down at a familiar table in a restaurant he built with his own hands, and within minutes, everything he once believed was thrown into question. Luciano's Bistro, a name that echoed through the culinary scene as a crown jewel in the heart of the city. Warm, golden lights, crisp white tablecloths, the refined clinking of silverware. This wasn't just a place that served food. It served as an experience, memories, emotion. Michael Luciano, the founder, the visionary, the chef, was no stranger to fame. He was the man who rose from nothing, who turned burned fingers and broken nights into a culinary empire. Every dish once bore his soul, but recently, something felt off. On paper, everything was perfect. 5-star reviews, consistent revenue, smiling staff. Yet Michael, the man who once felt the heartbeat of every dish that left his kitchen, now felt only silence, a hollow instinct, a whisper from within. You're losing something that matters. So, like he'd done once before, when he feared his craft had become mechanical, Michael went undercover. No chef's coat, no shouting orders, just a man in a gray hoodie and baseball cap, quietly sliding into a corner table as if he were nobody. It was raining that night, the kind of cold drizzle that makes the air feel heavier. The restaurant buzzed as always. Laughter, wine pouring. Waiters glided from table to table like dancers in a well-rehearsed ballet. Luciano's Bistro was alive, but Michael wasn't listening to the rhythm. He was listening for the silence between the notes. Then, it happened. From the table behind him, 2 young voices cut through the ambiance, low, tense. Not the careless whispers of kids, but something raw, bitter. You think, we'll see him? I don't know. But Mom said he comes here, this place. What if we get caught? Doesn't matter. I need to see his face. He's the one who ruined everything. Michael froze. His fingers slipped slightly on the condensation of his water glass. A part of him wanted to dismiss it. 2 kids, talking nonsense. But another part, the one forged from years of hard truths, whispered, "They're talking about you." The tension coiled in his chest, and then came the blow. From the second boy. Mum said, he destroyed her. Life, Michael's breath caught. He gripped the menu like it was a lifeline, eyes scanning the page but reading nothing. His pulse hammered in his ears, yet somehow his face remained still, rehearsed composure from years in the spotlight. His mind screamed, no, it can't be. But his heart already knew. Somewhere in his past, in a deal made, a decision signed, a dream pursued, he had stepped over someone, maybe even many. And now, the ghosts he never meant to summon were whispering from the next table over. What began as a quiet return to his roots, it was becoming a reckoning. Not with his business, but with a past someone never forgot, even if he had. Michael Luciano sat silently at his table, but inside his head, a storm was raging. The words from the 2 boys behind him didn't just catch his attention, they squeezed his chest with a fear he hadn't felt in years. Mom said, "He ruined her life. I need to see his face. I have to look into the eyes of the man who took everything from us. Someone had once suffered because of him. A woman, the mother of these 2 boys. And yet, with all his memories, Michael couldn't place anyone who might hate him like that. But if they had a photo of him, like they claimed, then this wasn't some misunderstanding. This was real." Michael couldn't sit still. He got up, slowly walking toward the bar near the kitchen, pretending to check on the food. From there, he discreetly glanced at the boys' table. One wore a worn-out hoodie, the other a low-slung cap, both glancing around nervously like they were doing something forbidden. He signaled the waitress who had taken his order earlier. "Those 2 boys over there, do they come here often?" he asked, voice as calm as he could manage. She looked over, then shook her head. Don't think so. Probably their first time. Have they caused any trouble? Not at all. Just sitting there with their drinks. Why? Michael gave a small shrug. Just curious. She smiled and walked away. Michael returned to his table, but his mind was no longer in the restaurant. It was rewinding through the past, digging for a face, a memory, any clue that could connect to the woman they spoke of. Angela, Claire, maybe Maria. The names floated up, but none fit. Then one boy's voice pierced the hum of the restaurant again, clearer this time. Mom never told us everything, but I know he's the reason she hit rock bottom. I just want to see him. Look him in the eyes and ask, why? Michael couldn't take it anymore. He had to know. He had to face the truth, no matter how painful. He stood up and walked slowly toward the boys' table. As his shadow stretched across the edge, both boys looked up, startled and guarded. Hey there, Michael said gently. I couldn't help overhearing. Sounds like you're looking for someone? The boys exchanged glances. One nodded but said nothing. The other narrowed his eyes, studying Michael's face. You look familiar, the boy in the hoodie mumbled. Michael forced a smile. Maybe I just look like someone you know. But the boy's eyes stayed locked on him. No. Mom showed us a picture. It's you. I'm sure of it. The kid's voice grew firmer. Michael felt the room tilt. He took a deep breath. All right, I'm Michael Luciano, he admitted. But why are you looking for me? The boys flinched. The one in the cap lowered his head. The other looked up, eyes burning. Because you destroyed our mom's life! The words hit Michael like a punch to the chest. What did you say? He gasped. Our mom is Angela Carter. She used to work here as your sous chef, but you stole her ideas. You took credit for the dish she created. After she confronted you, you ignored her. And then, no one in this industry would hire her. Again, she lost everything. While you built this place and got famous. Michael froze. Angela Carter. The name struck him like lightning. He remembered her now. The young, brilliant woman full of ideas, who worked beside him when Luciano's bistro had just opened. A fierce talent. And then she was gone. He always thought she left on her own. He never imagined. He was the reason. He stood motionless. I didn't know it got that bad, he stammered. I thought she just quit. Because of you, the boy snapped. She said that after she questioned you about the recipe you stole, you shut her out. Then no restaurant would take her. You made sure she'd never work in a kitchen again. Michael stumbled back, words stuck in his throat. I'm sorry, he whispered. If that's true, then I need to hear it from her. The boys exchanged glances again. Then the older one nodded. She's at home. If you're brave enough, come with us. Michael clenched his fists and nodded, because it was time to face the truth and take responsibility, no matter how brutal. It might be. A light drizzle had begun to fall as Michael stepped out of the car in front of an old, weathered apartment building. The walls were cracked and peeling, the stairwell damp with moss, dimly lit by a flickering hallway bulb. He looked up toward the third-floor window where a faint light still glowed, where Angela Carter now lived. Michael had never imagined the woman who once spent late nights with him crafting menus for Luciano's bistro could now be living in a rundown housing complex while he owned a chain of high-end restaurants across the city. The door creaked open after a few soft knocks. The older boy, Jacob, stood there, his eyes still guarded, never leaving Michael's. You really came, Jacob said. His voice was still cold, but there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Michael nodded, his heart heavy. I need to hear everything. From your mother herself. Jacob stepped aside without a word. She's in the living room. Michael stepped in. The space was small but clean, modestly arranged. A few old photos hung on the wall. Angela, in chef whites, smiling brightly. Next to it, a picture of two little boys in front of a homemade birthday cake. There was a soft scent of jasmine in the air, and a silence so tense it felt like the moment before a storm. Angela sat on the couch, the glow of the TV casting soft shadows across her face. No longer the youthful girl he remembered, but still with that quiet resilience that had once impressed him so deeply. She turned slowly. Her eyes froze for a second. Michael Luciano. She spoke his name like a sentence. Michael stepped forward but didn't sit. Angela, Why are you here? She cut in sharply. To see how I live after you strangled my career? Michael faltered, then spoke softly. I didn't know. I truly didn't know what you went through. But tonight I heard your sons talk, and I need to hear it from you. All of it. Angela leaned back, folding her arms, eyes locked on his. You want to hear? She said with a cold, bitter smile. Then listen, she began. Angela had been the first sous chef at Luciano's Bistro, back when Michael was still clawing his way into the fine dining scene. They had built the menu together, tested dozens of recipes through sleepless nights. Some of the restaurant's most iconic dishes, the saffron risotto, the pumpkin gnocchi, the signature truffle mushroom sauce, were born from recipes she had handwritten in her notebook. She had once thought Michael was the ideal mentor, but when the media started praising the genius of young culinary prodigy Michael Luciano, and the menu was hailed as his artistic vision, her name was nowhere in sight. She stayed silent for a while, but when she finally confronted him, asking for formal recognition during the launch of a new branch, his response was silence, followed by a formal reassignment to a secondary kitchen role. I left after that. But it didn't stop there, she said, her voice tightening, her eyes glassy. I applied to other restaurants. At first they seemed promising. Then, days later, all the offers vanished. One person told me outright, "You worked with Michael Luciano?" Then no. Angela exhaled sharply, trying to contain the emotion. I had no proof, but I knew someone was behind it. And the only one, with a reason, was you. Michael sat stunned. I never told anyone to do that, he said, breathless. No, Angela shot back. But you never told them not to. When you hold power, your silence can be as sharp as a blade. The air thickened. Michael finally sat, hands clasped tightly. There were no excuses left. I was wrong. I let ambition blind me. I didn't know I'd taken so much from you. Angela was quiet. For the first time since Michael entered, her eyes weren't sharp like daggers. So what now? She asked hoarsely. Michael looked up. Give me a chance. Not to justify, but to make it right. I want to invite you back to Luciano's Bistro as co-executive chef. I'll acknowledge you publicly, give you full creative control over the menu, and this time, the spotlight will be shared. Angela was silent for a long time. Jacob and his brother stood at the doorway, holding their breath. At last, Angela spoke. You think one invitation erases everything? Michael shook his head. No, but it's the only way I know how to start making amends. Whether you accept or not, I'll respect your choice. Angela lowered her gaze. Then, unexpectedly, she reached out her hand. I'm not saying I trust you again, but I'll... Come, one last try. Michael clasped her hand. A tangled past had just begun to unravel. But the road ahead would be long. 1 week after that fateful encounter, Angela Carter returned for the first time to the place that had once defined her youth, Luciano's Bistro. She was no longer the young woman full of dreams stepping into the kitchen for the first time. Angela now carried the caution of someone who had been betrayed. But one thing hadn't changed. The fire for her craft still burned in her eyes, simmering beneath the cool exterior that life had forced her to build. Michael greeted her by the door. He didn't smile too broadly, didn't act overly excited. Just a nod, respectful and sincere. "Thank you for coming," he said. Angela glanced around at the curious looks from the kitchen staff, young employees who had never met her but had heard her story through Michael. No one said a word, but the air was thick with anticipation. Michael led her into the office, a space he had spent the past week preparing meticulously. Position: co-head chef authority. Full creative control over new dishes, hiring, and seasonal menus. Press: a public release. Would be issued the moment Angela agreed to return. Angela scanned the contract, her face unreadable. But when her eyes landed on the financial terms, a worthy salary and a direct percentage of revenue, something flickered in her expression. "You really intend to make this public?" Angela asked. "Yes," Michael nodded. "This industry needs to know who you are, and frankly, should have known a long time ago." Angela set the papers down, arms crossed. "I'm not agreeing to anything yet. I'll try. For 1 month." "1 month is enough time for me to prove I'm not the man I used to be," Michael replied. And so she returned. On her first day, it felt like the entire kitchen held its breath. Angela didn't say much. She put on an apron, inspected the ingredients, retested old recipes, as if she'd never left. Some of the younger staff watched curiously. One whispered, "That's the one who created the legendary truffle gnocchi." Another asked, "Is it true she had her credit stolen?" Michael observed from afar, never intervening. He knew. If he wanted to rebuild trust, he had to let Angela reclaim her place on her own terms, through her craft, not his apologies. But it wasn't easy. In week 2, as they prepared for a tasting session with food media, Angela requested a change to the sauce of the restaurant's signature dish, wild mushroom ravioli. A young chef immediately objected. "But that's been our flagship dish since day 1. Regulars will notice." Angela looked him straight in the eye. "And you think I don't know what I'm doing?" The chef hesitated. Tension crackled through the kitchen. Michael had to step in. He didn't take sides. He simply said calmly, "She's the co-head chef, and she created the original version of that dish before you were even in culinary school." His words sliced through the skepticism like a knife. Things returned to normal, though some lingering doubt remained. Then came the tasting event. Angela unveiled the new dish, Wild Mushroom Ravioli, 2025 edition, richer in flavor, more tender, its sauce silky and refined to the last detail. The food critics, long familiar with the previous version, were taken aback and impressed. One of them leaned over and whispered, "It's like the dish finally found the soul it had been missing all along." Michael watched from the back, witnessing Angela's first smile since her return. He knew then, the hardest part wasn't getting her to come back. It was helping her believe that this place had always had a space for her. That night, after the restaurant had emptied, Angela lingered by the sink, hands still wet. Michael approached quietly. "You made the entire team reflect today. And you made me reflect on myself too." Angela didn't turn around, but her voice was softer. "I'm still not ready to forgive. But today, I saw a piece of myself. Again." Michael smiled. "That's enough for me. The doors of the past don't close easily. But with every dish, every shared day in the kitchen, Michael and Angela were beginning to write a new chapter. Not just for the restaurant, but for their own lives. Angela never imagined she would stand in front of a camera again. But that day, in a televised feature honoring pioneers in the restaurant industry, She stood next to Michael under the studio lights of a local TV station, a microphone clipped to her collar, a camera capturing every flicker of expression. At first, she was reserved. But when the reporter asked, "What made you return to the kitchen after all these years away from the industry?" Angela simply glanced at Michael, then replied, "Because some people need to look back, and because I owe myself a second chance." That answer became the opening line to a storm that would follow. Within 48 hours of the episode airing, social media ignited. On a major food forum, a post went viral. The truth behind Luciano's Bistro. Were signature dishes stolen from a forgotten female chef? The post dissected dish after dish from Luciano's menu, accompanied by old notes from an anonymous account claiming the famed recipes were originally created by Angela Carter, the woman who had mysteriously vanished from the industry nearly a decade ago. The author? A former sous chef, once Angela's closest protege. The media pounced like sharks smelling blood. Michael received a barrage of calls. "Mr. Luciano, is it true you once stole credit from Angela Carter? We need an official statement." From the restaurant, "If you have nothing to hide, why the silence?" Angela, though resilient, wasn't immune to the impact. Headlines labeled her the hidden victim, the forgotten woman, and she became the center of every narrative, even though she had never chosen to tell that story. The pressure peaked when a reporter stormed into the restaurant during peak hours, shoving a microphone toward Michael. "Mr. Luciano, did you block Angela Carter from the industry? And now you're just performing redemption to save your image?" The restaurant froze. Guests paused mid-meal. Staff turned toward the kitchen. The camera light cast a tension as sharp as a trial. Angela stepped out, eyes like blades. She walked forward, placing herself between Michael and the lens. "He doesn't need to answer, because I will." And then she told the story, not with bitterness, not with anger, just the truth, from someone who had once been broken. "I used to think Michael Luciano was the man who destroyed my dream. I held on to that resentment, ran from it, carried it like a weight for 10 years. But when he showed up at my door, not with money, but with the willingness to listen, I realized that sometimes what we need isn't a perfect apology, but a sincere recognition of what was lost." Angela paused, then looked straight into the camera. "I didn't come back to serve someone else's reputation. I came back to reclaim my own name, and I'm doing just that, as a chef, a mother, and someone who refuses to let the past define her life." The restaurant fell silent, not with applause, but with reverence. Michael stood there exposed, but unflinching. He stepped forward, and for the first time publicly, he said, "I was so obsessed with building my career, I didn't see who I was stepping over to climb higher. If there's one person I owe gratitude and an apology, it's Angela Carter. And not today. 10 years ago." The story spread far and wide. But this time, the reaction was different. Major publication ran the headline, "Not the fall, but the rise. The redemption journey of Angela Carter and Luciano's Bistro." Online, people shared the interview with captions like, "When someone is brave enough to admit they were wrong, and someone else is strong enough to forgive." Angela didn't speak to the press again. She went back to the kitchen. Michael only told the media team one thing. "The best story here isn't about me, it's about her." Angela never thought she'd find herself sitting across from Michael Luciano, in the very office of the executive chef, a place she once only entered when summoned 10 years ago. But this time, she came on her own, not to demand, but to choose. On the table lay the official contract, co-head chef, Angela Carter, a deserving salary, full creative authority, her name printed alongside Michael's. On the menu, in press releases, and even in the brand's expansion, strategy, a role she never dared to dream of back in the day, no matter how talented she was. Michael sat silently across the table, no persuasion, no pressure. He understood. This time, The choice no longer belonged to him. Angela picked up the contract, but her eyes didn't linger on the clauses. They stopped on the blank spaces, the ones that had been left empty all those years ago. The places where her name should have been. Her effort should have been honored. She wasn't angry anymore, but the pain, it was still there, like an old scar, no longer bleeding, but never quite gone. "I used to hate you to my core, Michael," Angela said, her voice calm. "I even wrote a goodbye letter, a scorched earth kind of thing. I planned to send it after I walked out, but I didn't, because I knew it wouldn't change anything." Michael looked up, sadness in his eyes. "I wish you had sent it." Angela let out a quiet laugh, the first that wasn't forced. "I used to wish that too, but now, maybe everything happened the way it was meant to." A moment of silence hung in the air. Then Michael asked, "Do you still resent me?" Angela looked at him for a long time. "It's not resentment, Michael. It's lost trust." Her words weren't an accusation, just the truth. "But," she added, "a part of me wants to trust again, not for you, but for me." Angela set the contract back down. She didn't sign. She didn't walk away. "I won't sign this today, because I won't walk back into that kitchen as part of a reputation recovery campaign. I'll come back, if you truly need a partner. Not to repay a debt, but to build something good." Michael nodded sincerely. "I don't need a supporting actress beside me. I need a partner, the one I should have trusted from the beginning." Angela stood up. "Then prove it, not with words, with action." And Michael's first action was turning down a multi-million-dollar deal. An investment firm had offered to buy out Luciano's bistro just as the media storm began to settle. They called it an opportunity to wash away the past and start fresh in a new city, under a new name. All Michael had to do was say yes. He refused. "I don't want to run from my mistakes. I want to fix them, right where they started." Angela heard about it while testing recipes in her mother's old kitchen. When she read the article, she didn't smile. She just exhaled slowly. That very afternoon, she returned to Luciano's, carrying a stack of handwritten recipes that had long been shelved. But this time, she made sure her name wouldn't be left off a single one. A week later, at the press conference launching the new menu, Luciano X Carter, The Taste of Two Culinary Souls, Angela officially returned as co-founder. On stage, Michael opened the event not by thanking the press, but by thanking her. "If I built the restaurant, she gave its dishes a soul. It took me 10 years to say that, and I'll spend the rest of my life never forgetting it." Angela stood beside him, no longer dodging the spotlight. She didn't have to fight for the light anymore, because this time, the light found her on its own. At the back of the room, Jacob and Ethan stood silently, holding hands. The younger one, Ethan, whispered, "Mom's smiling." Jacob nodded. For the first time in a long time, 1 month after the press conference, Luciano's Bistro was no longer just a famous restaurant. It had become the story of a rebirth, and at the heart of that story stood none other than Angela Carter. The old kitchen, once a wound etched in her soul, was now the place where Angela lovingly rebuilt each dish, each memory. Forgotten recipes were brought back to life. Dishes that once existed only in memory now returned to the menu under her name. No more secret chef contributions, no more stolen credit. Every dish now bore the names of both creators, Luciano and Carter, and Michael, the man who once cast a shadow over Angela's light, had now become the one who held up the torch so she could step forward. He didn't just start over, he stepped back. He stood behind her as support, not as a centerpiece. Gone was the image of the self-important owner. Michael had learned to listen, to observe, and to accept that some talents aren't meant to be led, but to be walked beside. In their first weeks working together, there were many quiet moments. Not from tension, but from relearning. Like two artists who once shared the stage, got lost, and now rehearsed their duet once more. Michael often watched Angela from the kitchen door, the same spot where he once barked orders. Now he simply stood and watched her lead the team, saw the young chef's eyes light up with genuine admiration. He didn't feel jealous. He felt pride. One late afternoon, after the last customer had left, Angela stood by the window with a cup of tea in hand. Michael walked up slowly and said, "The day you left this place, I left a hole behind. I didn't realize until I stepped into that hole myself." Angela was silent for a moment, then softly replied, "It wasn't that you couldn't. See? Was that you didn't want to look." Michael nodded. No defense, no excuses. Just a quiet nod. Because it was true. That evening, for the first time in years, Angela sat at the chef's table with her two sons, Jacob and Ethan. Not to sample a new dish, but to celebrate. Silently and sincerely, Ethan whispered shyly, "Mom, I saw your name on the menu." Angela smiled. "Yes, sweetheart." And this time, they didn't forget a single letter. Jacob glanced over at Michael, who was quietly wiping glasses at the bar, then murmured, "Maybe. He's not the same man anymore." Angela didn't answer right away. She looked carefully at the boy who had once raged on her behalf, who once carried the innocent fury of wanting to find the man who destroyed everything. Then she gently said, "Some people rebuild with fresh concrete. Others choose to use the broken bricks. He's the second kind." And just like that, Luciano's Bistro entered a new chapter. Not one of a woman redeemed, but of two people learning to forgive and to grow from the very mistakes that nearly broke them. The following weekend, a prestigious culinary magazine published an interview with both Michael and Angela. The headline read, "Luciano X Carter, From Ruin to Revival, the Story of Two Culinary Souls." Inside the article, there was one quote that lingered long after the pages were turned. "Success isn't about who steps onto the stage first. It's about whether we're kind enough, after the spotlight fades, to call out the names of those who once stood beside us." And for Angela Carter, once forgotten, she had now become a guiding light for an entire generation of young chefs. As for Michael Luciano, a man who once believed he had to hold the spotlight alone, he had finally learned how to step aside, so they could shine together. Some say a restaurant exists to satisfy the palate, but the story of Luciano's Bistro shows that it can also be a place to heal old wounds through newfound trust, through a meal cooked with empathy, through an apology served with sincerity, and through a second chance given to the right person at the right time. Michael Luciano was once a successful restaurateur, but he failed at the most fundamental thing. He was grateful to those who helped him in the beginning. Angela Carter was once buried under silence and overshadowed by power, but she didn't choose a lifetime of resentment. She chose to return, not to erase the past, but to rewrite the present. And as for Jacob and Ethan, two boys who once carried anger in their hearts, they finally saw their mother smile again for the first time in years. And they understood something. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness means remembering without the pain. This story began with a meal Michael Luciano planned to use to hide, but it ended with meals served to empower those who truly deserve to shine. Because a legacy only becomes unshakable when it is built on kindness. Because a kitchen is only truly warm when the one behind the stove is called by their rightful name. If you've ever felt forgotten, dismissed, or robbed of something that was rightfully yours, remember this: your story isn't over. Sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to own their mistakes, and a new chapter begins. Thank you for watching this story. If this journey meant something to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need a reason to believe in second chances. Because somewhere, just beyond each failure, lies an opportunity to finally begin the right way.